Hello everybody and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Legion, Season 1, Episode 7, Chapter 7. Also known as the one where they finally had to admit that this takes place in the X-Men universe. Which I didn't realize, for me anyway, was going to be such a disappointment. Now, I'm overstating a little bit here, because obviously, yes, they've used the word mutants, they've talked about the astral plane somewhat, they've mentioned the human-mutant war on some level, but this show hasn't gone out of its way to point out that this is an X-Men show. You could easily have missed the X in the title and the incredibly vague references to some X-Men universe stuff up until now. You could have just been watching this crazy bonkers show that was about this guy who maybe has some mental problems and maybe he's traveling in some kind of weird mental plane, and now all of a sudden we get the X-Men info dump that everybody has been theorizing about online for so long, and it wasn't what I was hoping it would be. But let's go through this in chronological order. Episode starts out with Carrie being chased by the Eye, as she was in the previous episode. Kind of a thread that just sort of wandered off and got lost last episode. I realized after I recorded the recap, wait a minute, what happened to Carrie and the Eye? He was chasing her, and then all of a sudden there's just other stuff going on. Apparently she's still being chased by him. Really interesting lighting going on here at Dream Clockworks, where there are red lights flashing and seemingly half zombified patients running around the halls. Maybe that's just because I've watched too much zombie TV, but that was my take on it, is that these patients have just turned feral and are running around, except they're not real. So that's okay. And then we get to the demon with yellow eyes. He's in the room with David's sister. It's a cool room. It's like it's got maps all over the walls and there's globes everywhere. I think the idea is that he's sort of overseeing everything from here, although you don't get specific, at least not that I noticed, like it's not a screen that's going to a specific instance of something that's happening, but generally the idea that he's overseeing. He has David's sister in the room there with him, and he really wants, she, like, because Lenny pops in and out too, great editing in this, by the way, wants to know about David, and specifically the day that David came to stay with them. And here's where we get our first giant, like, confirmation, red flag. Yes, the internet has been right all along. Yes, they are going with the comic book lore, because you see her recounting this night, and for the briefest of moments, right, you see the wheelchair. Not just any wheelchair, ladies and gentlemen. The wheelchair with the X on the wheels. That's right, it's confirmed. Professor X was with David's dad when David's dad dropped him off at his new parents' house, as the internet had theorized. I kid, of course. So, I've skirted around this for a long time because I knew that this was the theory. I knew this is what happened in the comic books. But now the show just seems to be saying, yeah, here you go. Here's some Professor X, David's dad. You guys are cool with that, right? Yeah. I mean, you guys figured it out like episode 1. You read the comics. You're not going to be shocked by that, are you? Again, having never mentioned that Professor X is a thing in this universe up until now, as far as I can remember in the show, barely having used the word mutants, especially not in the past 3 or 4 episodes. Like, early on, we had references to "You're a very powerful mutant, David," Melanie Bird. That is her name, by the way. Jean Smart is the actress's name. Last episode, got it super wrong. Nobody called me out on it. I appreciate that, but I want you to know I noticed. Read the wrong column of IMDb. But Melanie Bird talks to him about being a mutant early on, but it's always sort of cloaked in how much craziness is going on and how weird and wonderful this show is. And I don't know that once you get the heavier X-Men layers in, and especially not just the X-Men chair, right? Because that's Professor X's chair, like, from the movies. It's not some interesting stylized version of Professor X's chair from Legion, and wouldn't that be cool? But that's not what we get. I don't know how these two are going to connect together, and I'll get into a little bit more further on in the plot, but we do find out, and there's the other question too. Here's another question. The demon with the yellow eyes, grilling Cid's sister about the day that he came to her house, that David came to stay with them. Does he not remember? Or she, Lenny, whatever. Does the demon with the yellow eyes not know how it got there? Is it like experiencing some kind of amnesia? Did the jump into David's mind rattle loose some stuff that it's still trying to figure out? Because if so, why David later on hypothesizes that it's in it for revenge. I don't know why he's so obsessed. No. I take it back. I was wrong. Once again, thank you. I caught it before the comments. I'm sure you guys are already down there telling me what I was wrong. But there is some specific MacGuffin he's looking for. There is a thing, and I don't know what it is yet. I was reading on the chat boards, people were trying to hypothesize. I didn't see any good theories. Some people mentioned the doll, but that had been revealed to be just another cover for the demon with the yellow eyes in that early episode. And I'd almost forgotten that there was a doll. So there's something that Professor X hid with David. Possibly real, possibly mental. That's what he's looking for. My bad on calling him out. I'm very sorry. Mea culpa. But speaking of the demon with the yellow eyes, we then roll right into a scene where Oliver in his ice cube has Carrie in there and he tells him all about Farouk and the Shadow King. And by the way, we're still in the X-Men universe. And that's in that comic book character. And again, this was handled kind of weirdly. From a story perspective, I can handwave this because Oliver is, he's sort of crazy. He's lost his memory. Great acting again by Jermaine Clement, by the way, in this scene. Really playing up the sort of nutso memory lost guy, lost in his own mind kind of thing. Love that character. So you can forgive it to an extent, but they just sort of, again, drop this, oh yeah, there's this guy named Amal Farouk. Yeah, you remember him, right? We don't remember him because we've never been introduced to him or encountered him any kind, but the characters get to talk about how they all know who he is and how he's a bad guy. So now we all have the information. Let's move on. No, that's not how you do that. They've set up so much stuff like with layers and bits, and I get that you want to sort of avoid the internet knows everything culture for all the people who are looking it up and not reveal. I mean, if you have Amal Farouk in the show, if you have like mention him on a newscast or something, you're like half garbled. Somebody's gonna, in backwards, somebody's gonna decode that on Reddit and be like, I found it. They said Amal Farouk. It's confirmed. But just to wait until here and be like, oh yeah, by the way, everybody knows about it. It's like an anti-reveal. It's almost like the show, again, doesn't really want to be doing this comic book thing. So it's just like ripping that Band-Aid off as fast as it can so they can get on to doing more bunker stuff. In any case, Carrie, with this new information, goes and meets Cid, gives her some special glasses that Jermaine Clement had cooked up for them that allow them to see what's real? Which is odd because we know this is, I say a dream, it's in the astral plane. Again, one of those, if it's a dream, I can understand that. Like, I know what a dream is. It being in the astral plane means that there's just no rules, which, I mean, there aren't rules in a dream either, but I don't know, why would there be something that was real and something that was not real? It's all not real. It's a projection. Anyway, I guess it allows them to filter out the noise that the yellow-eyed demon is sending their way, or Amal Farouk, if you want to call him that, the Shadow King now. Now it's officially out of the bag. That's definitely who it is. It allows them to see through that. All of the zombie patients are not zombie patients. They're just, projections to mess them up. And it's a really, I do enjoy the scene where Carrie is telling Cid about all this stuff, and she's like, yeah, I get it. No, I understand. Yeah, no, for real, dude. I understand. You don't have to mansplain anymore. That was kind of fun. And beautifully shot, by the way, too. Him in the like weird little soundproof chamber that Oliver created for them, so the Shadow King wouldn't be able to get to them. That was really neat. And so we follow then Sid as she goes back into the mental asylum. She puts on the glasses. She sees in black and white now, which is leading to amazing things, that, you know, a bunch of these crazy people aren't there. It's just her and the other quote-unquote real people who were transferred in there from the house, where they are still frozen in time, by the way. And someone on the chat board, by the way, on the messages, on the comments, that's what they call it on YouTube, thank you, mentioned a great theory that I loved about how maybe if this was a projection that the Shadow King was creating within David's mind, and since we had seen Sid and David like holding each other as the bullets were coming at them, that there was a possibility that they had been swapped, and that the David and the Sid that we were seeing inside the clockworks I'm just going to call it dream clockworks because I want to, and I hate the idea of the astral plane. If the dream clockworks that we were seeing, David and Sid, were actually reversed, I thought that was a cool idea. Apparently not, though. Apparently that's not the case here, because we go through this whole episode and skip forward in time, and there's no... I really like that idea, but cool theories don't always make it through. Maybe you should be a writer. Speaking of the frozen time room, though, Melanie Bird meets up with Carrie and Oliver to try to figure out a way to keep them from getting killed in this plane, whichever one it is that we're in here currently, being shot at by bullets. And this was a really, I think, maybe one of the best scenes in the show. Not the best, because that's coming up, but her seeing her husband... And we've kind of laid the groundwork that he doesn't remember her before, because he keeps asking Carrie if she's an Asian lady, if she's Chinese or Japanese, and he's like, no, your wife is not Chinese. Maybe a clue there? I don't know what to, but it seems like kind of a weird detail. Maybe it's just Jermaine Clement being funny and weird, and they just wanted to make him goofy. But there's possibly something in there that they're hinting at. But regardless, he doesn't remember her. And she obviously remembers him, like she's been, checking on him in his cryo sleep every day, practically for her whole life. And that scene where she, sees him and he's like, do I know you? I don't remember. I'll remember where I saw you. And her just kind of having to swallow it, not like throwing herself at him, be like, it's me, honey, I've been waiting so long. We're just like realizing that she has a job to do, that she has to just deal with the fact that her husband has been lost inside of his own mind for so long that he doesn't remember her, was pretty impactful, I thought. She goes down, and there's a weird scene where there's blood dripping up, I think so what she finds, obviously, that our telekinetic mutant from the first episode and a couple episodes ago, he hasn't showed up a lot in the show, but the one who's appears to be holding the gun and gunning down Sid and David, the real version of him has been stabbed in the stomach or the chest by somebody, the eye, almost certainly, and left in a closet to die. He is still a little bit alive, which is why in Clockworks he's, he's sort of out of it. He's got the, just straight up stone drool face, and that's all. But we do see that the eye had replaced him and was the one using his form to try to gun everybody down. Meanwhile, inside Clockwork, Sid meets up with more of the gang, gives them more of the cool glasses that help them see the real world. And then, after a commercial break, we get what is maybe my least favorite scene of this series so far. And it's sort of a build-on to the other scenes that I've mentioned that I had an issue on, which is that David... Now, there's some fun stuff in this scene, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying, like, I'm never watching this show again, it got stupid, and I don't like it. But I was a little bit disappointed by some of the stuff in this scene. Not disappointed by Dan Stevens talking to himself in a bad English accent, which Dan Stevens actually has a real English accent, and he's not doing it. It's pretty great to have that kind of dialogue going on, and Dan Stevens is a great actor. He meets the rational part of his mind. That's why he has an English accent, you guys. He meets the rational part of his mind, which he has created because, as you'll recall, last episode he was stuck in a coffin. Not a literal coffin, though. This was just a coffin inside of his mind in the astral plane. It's just a projection of the yellow-eyed demon and himself, of David's. And so David creates this other fragment of his mind, and it says to him, hey, listen, it's not real. We can figure a way out of this. And he says, how? And he says, well, let's imagine a classroom with a chalkboard. And we see this classroom with a bunch of chalkboards. I know that there are going to be those of you who disagree with me about this, and that's fine. But this, to me, was such a stretch because David's rational mind says to him, okay, what do you know? What do you know for sure? And he points out, there's two things that we have, big piece of information. We know that you were adopted, and we know that you have a parasite of some kind in your mind. And from there, they extrapolate Professor X fighting with Amal Farouk on the astral plane and taking David to live with foster parents to get him away from Amal Farouk. They can't figure that out in the chalkboard, but like jumping from those two bits of information, and maybe it's because so David gets to mutant, right? He jumps to, this parasite must be a mutant like me. Which maybe makes sense to David because if he's lived in this world where X-Men, that was a huge deal, that might be a logical leap for him, but it doesn't feel like a logical leap because the show has been so reticent to talk about being an X-Men show. Okay, it's been, again, we've mentioned mutants, we sort of mentioned the war between them, but to jump then straight to, my dad must be a mutant, and he fought this other mutant, and then that mutant jumped inside my head from adopted and parasite. There's a here, and there's a there, and there's not a good line to connect those two, in my opinion. We get to connect those lines because we know already the basis of the comic book, right? We can look at the overarching story of the comic and know what it's about. This is not, David doesn't get that. And it felt like a huge cheat. And on top of that, on top of being a cheat, it felt just a little bit, again, there's this sort of sense that the show has been avoiding this, not because it wanted to stretch out the surprise, but just, and this is me projecting, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Mulholland has been itching to get to the scene. It almost feels like they're like, fine, yeah, we're an X-Men show. We have X-Men and mutants. I mean, we said mutants before, but yeah, they're those mutants that you saw in X-Men The Last Stand. Same things. Okay, moving on. That's what it feels like the show is doing here. And I don't love it. It's not even a really interesting scene. It doesn't feel like a lot of stuff is accomplished from a character standpoint. It's kind of visually cool with the animated chalkboards. Like, I'm okay with that, but with all of the other bonker stuff the show has done and building up and layers of weird cinematic tricks to make you feel a certain way, then you just drop us into a classroom and say, hello, ladies and gentlemen. The answer to the problem that you have been trying to figure out is X-Men. Choice C. I don't, like, it's just the most, it felt like I was being, not even talked down to, that's not the right word. Just, it felt like a cheat. It's an info dump. It's a character talking to himself about what he knows. It's the most, like, usually it's a, Bob, as you know, Bob, we are standing here on the air traffic control and there's a plane coming towards us at 200 miles an hour. And, catching the audience up to speed with that kind of thing. This isn't even a separate character. It's just the character talking to himself about stuff that he knows. It works out better than an As You Know, Bob, because it's still Legion and it's not like a terrible show. But this felt like a cheat. It felt like a problem. But, to make up for that, here's the spoonful of sugar. Okay, that was the medicine, and the spoonful of sugar to help it go down is the Yellow-Eyed Demon / Lenny chasing Sid and Carrie through the halls of Clockwork in silent movie black and white mode, complete with title cards for dialogue. I forgot the word dialogue for a second there, but that's awesome. I mean, it's legit and great, and that's the kind of stuff we love in this show, right? That's the kind of stuff that has made us fall in love with this, is it's not afraid to do these odd stylistic things and just take these risks and go bonkers off the walls. Here we are with more bonkers off the wall stuff. We know now that this is the Shadow King. We know what its agenda is. It's clearly trying to just rip everything up so that it can be in charge of David. And it works really well. It works really well. And on top of all that is one of the most satisfying things I have ever seen for the Eye, who shows up in this scene and gets crunchified by the demon with the yellow eyes. My wife was watching this part, and she was she had this great response to it. She said, I'm a little bit grossed out, but also incredibly satisfied that just happened. And it's so true. The way that they showed him getting, man, that's not how you want to go. This is not how you want to die. Oh, it was super gross. But we also, and this is a sort of a meanwhile thing, they're still in the astral, out of the astral plane, Oliver and, although if they're not in the astral plane, how is Oliver able to manifest? Because he doesn't have a body there. Anyway, Oliver and Melanie and Carrie are all trying to stop the bullets. Oliver has a really cool word shield that he's creating. It really reminds me, I may have mentioned this in the recaps before, but there's a book called The Raw Shark Texts by Stephen Hall. Raw Shark Texts. It's hard to say. It sounds like Rorschach tests on purpose. And it reminded me that if you guys like this show at all and you like to read, I would heavily recommend that. I think it's got some very cool and interesting and similar ideas about the mind and stuff. And him creating this word shield with the word shield that hopefully would repel these bullets was a really cool idea and felt so, not ripped out of that, obviously, but very similar to those ideas. Unfortunately, Demon with the Yellow Eyes shows up, wrecks his shop a little bit, goes back, and continues to terrorize, our two heroines who are still trapped in the astral plane. And we get snapped out of the DreamWorks reality. The dream reality. Clockwork Dreams. Yeah, the DreamWorks. David is here, he finally gets out of the classroom. He finally realizes what he can do inside of his own mind and just tears everything up, as we've seen him do before, except he's in the astral plane now. He tears everything up, as we've seen him do, and the wonderful slow motion and things busting out. And I would love to see, by the way, I want to, maybe there is some behind the scenes stuff. I'd love to see some behind the scenes of how they film this slow motion explosion stuff. I mean, I know that you can film explosions in slow motion, but the way things move seems particularly interesting, and superimposing it on David. I know that it's tricks and CG and things like that, but not all CG though. I think a lot of it's, 90% of it's probably in camera. I'd just love to see the details on that. But he starts ripping up the dream clockworks, pops everybody back out to the real reality, spins himself around. You get half a second moment where you think he's been hit by the bullets because he goes to protect Sid from the bullets, even though she was there to protect him initially. And then you see that he's caught them in his hand because David's a boss now. And then we get to go back to Summerland. And Ptonomy's back. Where did he go? Where was Ptonomy that whole time? I mean, it's fine if he wasn't, we know that he was in Dream Clockworks because we saw him getting shrunkified. Not literally, the shrink. Lenny was talking to him about his mom's death and stuff. We know that he was in that reality, but we didn't see him hardly at all after that. I think he may have been in the background. I'm curious why they didn't have him at all in there. But he shows back up. He's with the rest of the group. They're carrying the wounded or possibly dead psychokinetic guy back to Summerland. And Melanie Bird goes down to her ice cube, and looks inside the Jules Verne suit. And what does she find? Nothing, because Oliver's out, baby, in the flesh. He's returned. He's making everybody eggs. They look delicious. It made me want eggs at 11 o'clock last night. I didn't go get any because I'm trying to get less fat. But it was really great to see them get back together. And I wasn't fully understanding if he recognized her now or not. It seemed like there was a more of a spark of recognition, but it didn't click with me that I have all my memories now and I know who you are. You're my wife. Yes. But they have something back. And that was nice to see. And it really feels like at this point that you've got your happy ending. Except you don't, because the Division from the beginning of the show comes back and they're not happy. And on top of that, the device that they've put on top of David's head to keep the Shadow King in place and not let him have any control over David's body is starting to shore out. He's starting to see the world's angriest boy in the world again. And, you know, we see that David is going to release the Shadow King to get access to all of his powers and blow all these people away. It felt a little bit like a tacked on thing, like, oh, by the way, did you forget us? Again, this is not, I don't want to bash this episode because there's a lot of great stuff in this episode, but of the episodes of Legion that we've got, this may be my least favorite. And it has some of my most favorite stuff in it. But as a story, as elements of like progression of story, and especially coming up on, next week is the final episode, it felt like it was trying to do a lot of things at once, and it gives you a finale and then sort of rips that finale away, which I understand cliffhangers and stuff, that's fine to a point, but it seemed a little bit all over the place. I also, by the way, thought it was really interesting when David has the headband on and he's in Summerland, we don't get any weird cuts. We don't get any of that sort of atmospheric, dreamlike cinematography and editing that we got when it was him with the yellow-eyed demon in his head messing things up. And it's seeming to imply that those things were a symptom of this thing manipulating the world around him, or at least preventing David from seeing certain things. There's also, I would say, still a good number of questions about, for me anyway, about the show. And I guess the biggest one, and maybe I'm missing something here, but I don't understand quite what Lenny's deal is. I know that I get that she's like a form being used by the Shadow King, but where did Lenny come from in the first place? Was she just, because we have Lenny from Clockworks that we saw in the first episode. We get revealed that David's friend from outside of Clockworks wasn't Lenny, it was Benny, that it was a different guy, and there are indications sometimes when Lenny's talking to David inside David's mind that she's still referring to herself as a man, which is, by the way, actually sort of literally true, that the script was written for a guy and Aubrey Plaza came in and they're like, do you want to play this guy's role? Like, not as a guy, just you're going to say the lines. I thought that was pretty cool, but it does make me ask why. Like, not from a, yes, you want to hire Aubrey Plaza because she's great, but from a story perspective, what is the Shadow King's endgame, like layering Lenny over Benny over the Shadow King, if Lenny wasn't really that close to David, or were there two different people that were close to David? It feels like that question has still yet to be answered, and maybe some other stuff too. There's a lot of stuff that's been sort of waved at and hinted at that has not been resolved. All of the big stuff gets answered in this episode, right? We get all of the what's going on with the Shadow King. Yes, probably Professor X, you guys. It could be somebody else's wheelchair with an X shape, or maybe he's just hanging out there with David's dad, as I was joking earlier. But a pretty good chance that we're going to get into some actual X-Men lore. But it feels like that these are not the answers that I wanted. If you're going to have this show lead up to all of this weirdness and all of this craziness and then just be like, yep, it's a comic book. Well, we know. I mean, all you had to do was Google it and you would figure out, yeah, it's a comic book universe. Like, that's not enough for me. I want something else. I want more than just, yeah, it's a comic book. I think we're going to get more. I think there will be more in the next episode. I hope. But we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait and see. I'd love to hear what you guys thought. I have been loving hearing what you guys thought. You corrected me and gave me cool theories, and some didn't turn out to be true. I'm very sorry. But still, please leave your comments. Let me know what you thought of the show. If you liked all the info dump stuff that I've been crapping on through the whole episode, I'd love to hear, what your take is on that, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and just generally share your thoughts, because this is a fun show to do that with. It's a fun show to sit around and theorize and look for the little things, and there are stuff that I'm sure that I missed either through stupidity or just inattention, and I'm sorry for that, but I count on you guys to keep me honest. So until next week, I'm Albert Berg. I am pretty. I am loved. And so are you. Take care, guys.